I am a doctoral candidate. I am a daddy of two little kids. My daughter is 3.5 and my son is 2, just 2 and a little bit. I'm married. We've been in Toronto. I've been attending the University of Toronto for the past 2.5 years. Because there are lots of student parents, graduate student parents, who have various concerns, and I think I can probably relay a lot of those concerns. And I also have 2 very different situations that I've gone through while being a graduate student. When I started the program, my wife was a stay-at-home mom, and I only had 1 child, and our financial situation was quite different. We didn't have much income, and thus had to rely on resources, and now we don't have to do that so much. Right now, both of my children are at daycare since the beginning of 2007. They're both receive child subsidy from the City of Toronto for both of them, 100%. And occasionally we get a babysitter on Friday or Saturday nights, so we can go up. This is a fairly new development. It wasn't like that in the past. We had a really hard time finding caretakers. So that's how we did childcare. I would give her a break occasionally and take care of them so she could go do something. And rarely we would get a babysitter, but not until it was 7 or 8 months old. And then our situation changed about 3 or 4 months after that. We found a babysitter by luck through an agency when we were extremely desperate about 6 months ago, when both of our kids got sick and we both had a full day of study. I live off campus, but fairly close to the university, within walking distance. But more important than living close to the university is having daycare close to where we live. Traveling, the public transportation is fairly good in Toronto, so as long as you're close to a subway line, then it's no problem getting back and forth from school. But if daycare is far away, that creates a real problem. And when we didn't have a car, it was next to impossible to do everything with a stroller, and especially with 2 kids. So yeah, living close to the university is important, but even more important is having a daycare close to where you live, if at all possible. We'll be waking up at between 6 and 7, depending on when my kids wake up, and getting them dressed, playing with them a little bit, getting myself ready, and driving them to daycare on certain days. On other days, my wife drives them to daycare on her way to school. If I'm driving them to daycare, I drive them to daycare, drive home, and then walk to the university or work from home. I'm fortunate to have an office at home now, so I can work there. So I often stay home and work, but I'd say I do 50% of my work at home, 50% at school, and study straight with a break for lunch. I do most of the cooking at home, so almost every day involves some sort of cooking, whether it's preparing dinner or preparing lunch or both. Sometimes preparing food for a day in advance, so enough so that we'll have leftovers for sure for the next day, because I know my schedule won't allow for me to cook the next day. In various ways. I have a $21,000 a year scholarship from OISE, and that's for the duration of my doctoral program. I also get external funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada and the Ontario Graduate Program, but those do not go on top of the money I get from OISE UT. Those are included in the $21,000 I get. So that's how much I get every year. And beyond that, my mother basically funds my education. This is the biggest problem in my life, and has been since we arrived in Toronto, is a lack of social support, both at school and at home. Most people have their families around, either grandparents or cousins or good friends to take care of the kids so that they can have a break once in a while, because it is exhausting, both physically and mentally to be a parent. So we've missed that ever since my daughter was born. Even in Montreal, we didn't have a good support network, but specifically here in Toronto. We don't have that many friends. The friends that we have either have kids of their own, and is not really reasonable to ask to give our kids to them to take care of for a while. So there's very little support at school. I suppose the faculty are fairly understanding, because most of them have had kids or have kids either living with them or that have gone away. The main gap, I'd say, is ways to form a bigger social support network, because that's what's missing for us. Well, first, let me say, in terms of the family care office, it needs more exposure, and people need to know it's there. I get asked all the time, people are surprised that there is a family care office when they're starting here, or even when they've been here for sometimes over a year as a grad student parent. So more exposure to what is available there. What would help me would be a network of people where there were other people in the same situation, where we could count on each other to, for example, in emergencies, to help each other out. And not just that, just socially, for people to get together with who are living through similar situations. It's hard to make friends when you're a parent. You don't have time to socialize that much, and those people have to be out there given the size of the graduate student population at University of Toronto. They don't have to be in my faculty, but they have to be out there. So having some sort of way to connect with those people would be helpful. Nowhere. They're not meeting my expectations. Unfortunately, the university is for-profit, and a lot of the services that we have are only because of a mobilized, organized effort on the part of graduate students and people who, the Graduate Students Union and other people who are involved in supplying these services, one of which is the Family Care Office. So what other services are missing? Not for me exactly right now, because I'm in a comfortable financial situation, but I know of other parents at the U of T who are having to use food bank quite often, who are struggling to pay their rent, who find it very stressful on their studies and are considering dropping out. And I think it should be the responsibility of the university in some way to provide either food or money for those people to get food so that they don't have to use a food bank. And the fact that these graduate students are at the poverty line even with student funding, I think says a lot. Since I started as a graduate student, even before that I was a daddy finishing my undergraduate degree at McGill. So when I arrived and began my MA program at U of T, I was already a parent, and it meant that I either had to take just day classes or beg my wife to take care of Laura, or both of them as it is these days, so I could take a night class. It mostly affects me in terms of managing my time. I know that I'm not going to have any time on the weekends if I want to be a good dad, so I don't leave any work for the weekends. I leave maybe 1 to 2 hours maximum for the whole weekend. I don't leave any work for nighttime, except for very rarely, and maybe some reading, but no writing at night. I have to manage my time very well and put in the hours during the day from Monday to Friday if I'm going to stay on top of things. And that's probably the key. Because before I was a parent, I could leave things to the last minute and go straight for 48 hours and finish a paper, but that doesn't exist anymore when you're a parent. You know, and if you try to make it happen, it causes a lot of friction in the relationship, and I suppose the kids suffer somewhat too. Okay, being a graduate student in a research program impacted our family life. My research context was international, so I moved the whole family to Brazil for 3 months a year and a half ago. So that was a pretty intense experience. It's impacted family life in that it makes a relationship difficult, especially when one of the parents is a stay-at-home parent, because I think generally in society, mothering or fathering is looked upon as a low-level job or work. And so sometimes as a student, when you get really involved in your work, you have the tendency to not respect how hard it is to stay at home and take care of kids and how exhausting it is. And that creates friction in a relationship. And it's frustrating for the person who's not the student, the stay-at-home person, because they feel like they don't have much of a life. The struggles can never outweigh the rewards because being a parent is rewarding enough. But as student experience relates to it, struggles are in keeping up with coursework when, like it or not, you're generally competing against other people who are in your faculty and in your program. And I'd say 80 to 90% of them don't have children and have time to study at night, and especially study on weekends, which most of them do. They'll come to the office and study 4 to 5 hours on the weekends. So I'm losing 10 hours there. I'm also losing maybe 5 to 10 during the week. So I have to really use my time well that I have. And I do. I think I use it better than a single student. So it is possible as a graduate student to be successful even when you have 2 little kids like I do. Other challenges of being a parent, I feel like at times I don't have the energy to be as energetic as I want to be with my kids because I'm mentally exhausted, not so much physically, but mentally exhausted. Actually, it's not that I don't have enough energy, it's that my patience is really thin. It's worn thin from my mental exercise during the day, I suppose. And I take that out on my kids and my wife. Probably more than I would like in terms of having a short fuse. The rewards of being a student parent are that it's a good example for your kids. They get to see me surrounded by books all the time, and books are a big part of their life. That's a nice thing about being a student as a parent. Another nice thing is that as a graduate student, you're fairly self-directed. So it's like running your own business or being in charge of your own business. So you're not working for somebody, so you can make your own hours and you can be flexible if you have to. For example, when my kids get sick, I can take a day off sometimes and stay with them. It's rewarding succeeding, knowing that you have more responsibility than most people. It's rewarding being able to show your kids off to other people at school. I suppose my final thoughts are words of encouragement for anybody that's in this situation or going to be in the situation of being a parent, either with 1 or 2 children or more, is that it is possible to succeed. It is possible regardless of financial circumstances. I was successful as a poor and now a wealthy graduate student. It is possible in a good relationship with your spouse, in a poor relationship with your spouse, when one person's staying at home, when both people are students, or when both have a full-time schedule. So it is possible to succeed in being a parent and a student.